Pay close attention to what you are seeing right now. Millions of Iranians are flooding the streets of Tehran. Regime flags are being torn down. What is appearing on your screen at this moment is not just another demonstration. It is the collapse of one of the most brutal regimes in the Middle East. A regime that ruled Iran with an iron fist for 47 years. And now, that same regime is on the verge of falling apart in real time. Look at these images. Men confronting the Revolutionary Guard with stones, and crowds chanting in unison, "Death to the dictator." But the most shocking revelation of all is this. Iran's own supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, now 85 years old, is reportedly planning to flee to Russia. Who could have imagined that the man who governed Iran for decades with absolute power would be preparing an escape? To truly understand what is unfolding right now, we need to go back to the year 1979. That year, the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was forced to leave the country after massive popular protests erupted across Iran. At the time, Iran was a relatively modern nation, with women attending universities and people living ordinary, open lives. But then Ayatollah Khomeini arrived, and with him came the Islamic Revolution. Iran was transformed into a harsh, theocratic state. Women were compelled to wear the hijab. Morality police began patrolling the streets, and any form of dissent was crushed with extreme violence. For 47 years, the Iranian people lived under this system. But today, things are different. The current generation of Iranians grew up with access to the internet. They saw how the rest of the world lives, and they no longer want to accept this tyranny. Now, that generation has taken to the streets, and the regime is inching closer and closer to a breaking point. Everything began on December 28th, 2024. Iran's currency, the rial, suffered a total collapse. Electronics merchants in Tehran went on strike. They relied on buying and selling imported goods. But as the currency lost its value day after day, continuing their businesses became impossible. At first, these were purely economic protests, shop owners voicing their anger at government policies. But very quickly, something shifted. The demonstrations expanded, and their focus changed. It was no longer just about the economy. It became about everything, about 47 years of repression. About a regime that spent billions funding terrorist groups while its own population struggled with hunger. And then the chants began to echo, "Death to the dictator." In just 1 week, protests spread to more than 108 cities and towns across Iran. Each day, more locations joined in, from the city of Ramadan to the capital, Tehran. A nation of 92 million people broke through the wall of fear that the regime had built over decades. Now, let's address something critically important. In any dictatorship, there are two pillars that keep the system standing: the economy and security. In Iran, both of these pillars collapsed at the same time. Let's start with security. Normally, when an uprising occurs, the army and the police step in, disperse the crowds, and restore order. But something very different is happening in Iran. A historic photograph circulated widely on social media. It shows two Iranian soldiers in uniform inside the Tehran metro. However, They're not holding the flag of the Islamic Republic. Instead, they're carrying the lion and sun flag, the symbol from the era of the Shah, the very same flag we mentioned at the beginning of this video. Soldiers wearing official uniforms are seen carrying the monarchist flag that the regime overthrew in 1979. This is not a simple act of insubordination. It is clear evidence that the chain of command within the lower ranks of the military is breaking apart. And there is more. In several cities, especially in the outskirts of Tehran and in rural areas, there are reports of security forces attempting to escape by changing into civilian clothes and abandoning their vehicles. The regime's greatest source of power has always been fear. In the past, the population feared the Revolutionary Guard. Now, it is the Revolutionary Guard that is afraid to take to the streets in uniform. But perhaps the most courageous face of this revolution is represented by women. The same women who were forced to cover themselves for decades are now setting fire to the pieces of fabric that symbolized that tyranny. Do you remember a woman named Mahsa Amini? In 2022, she was just 22 years old. She was detained by the morality police for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly. She was beaten, fell into a coma, and later died in the hospital. The regime claimed she suffered a heart attack, but the autopsy revealed internal bleeding. She was beaten to death. That incident sparked massive protests in 2022. The regime managed to crush them using extreme violence, but the seed had already been planted. And now, in 2025, that seed has grown into a massive tree that the regime can no longer cut down. Iranian women are not merely protesting, they are leading the movement. And men are not standing in front of them as protectors. They're fighting side by side, shoulder to shoulder. Now let us turn to the second pillar, the economy. Here, the situation is catastrophic. Tehran Stock Exchange has collapsed. The rial has reached its lowest value in history. Merchants are shutting down their shops, bringing economic life to a complete standstill. The closure of hundreds of stores in Tehran and Isfahan shows that the traditional merchant class, known as the bazaar, has also turned its back on the regime. Historically, what the bazaar decides in Iran becomes reality. They brought down the Shah in 1979, and now they're bringing down Khamenei. And here lies the cruel irony. For years, the Iranian regime funneled oil revenues to the Houthis and to Hezbollah in Lebanon, instead of distributing those resources to its own people. Now that money has dried up, sanctions have tightened, and the regime no longer has the financial capacity to sustain its own security forces. A police officer who is hungry and sees no future has no motivation to fire on his own people. This is the main reason behind the retreat we are witnessing on the ground right now. And now we arrive at the most surprising part of this entire story. According to an intelligence report shared by the Times, Ayatollah Khamenei has an escape plan. The man who ruled Iran as an absolute dictator for decades is preparing to flee the country if his security forces fail to contain the protests. The plan reportedly includes his escape alongside a close inner circle of up to 20 advisors and family members in the event that the Revolutionary Guard begins to defect to the other side. This group includes his son, who is expected to inherit the position of supreme leader if the current leader were to die. And where does he plan to flee? Moscow. Yes, Vladimir Putin has recently opened what some are calling an Airbnb for dictators. Syria's Assad is already there, enjoying his exile. And if the need arises in the coming days, Ayatollah Khamenei may become the next guest. While Khamenei prepares his escape, The Iranian parliament is issuing threats against American troops in the Middle East. It is the final gasp of a regime backed into a corner. And speaking of empty threats, let's talk about Donald Trump. Recently, President Trump posted on Twitter, "If Iran fires on and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is what they are known for, the United States will come to their aid. We are locked and loaded and ready to go." The Iranian regime did not welcome this statement, as it provided moral support to the protesters taking to the streets. In response, the Iranian parliament issued what can only be described as a reckless warning. The spokesperson for Iran's parliament declared that all U.S. personnel and military bases in the Middle East will be considered legitimate targets if President Trump followed through on his statement. But here is the problem. In recent days, the Iranian regime has begun attacking protesters. Just 2 days ago, we obtained footage from demonstrators showing that regime forces were literally firing on peaceful protesters who were filming everything. Now, you may be asking yourself, why are millions of people calling for the return of the Shah? Why are they demanding the comeback of a dynasty they overthrew 47 years ago? The answer is simple. This is not a political preference. It is a choice between civilization and barbarism. It is a complete rejection of the 1979 revolution, of the ideology brought by Khomeini, and of the very reason for the Islamic Republic's existence. Iranians want to erase the last 47 years of their country's history. They described those years as a nightmare, and now they are waking up. The people see Prince Reza Pahlavi not merely as a leader, but as a stolen future, as modernity, and as dignity reclaimed. In a recent statement, Prince Reza said, "I am more than ready to set foot in Iran as soon as the situation allows, and I will be there among my compatriots to lead the final battle." Now let's talk about what all of this means for the world. Because the collapse of the Iranian regime does not affect Iran alone. It impacts the entire Middle East. When Tehran falls, Hezbollah will no longer be able to pay salaries, and the Houthis will no longer be able to launch missiles. For decades, Iran has been the world's leading sponsor of terrorism. Billions of dollars have been funneled to terrorist groups across the Middle East. Now that financial lifeline is drying up. For Israel, this represents a massive strategic victory. For years, Israel has been fighting Iranian proxies across the region. Now, the source of that support is being cut off at its origin. And speaking of Israel, there is something significant happening behind the scenes. Last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in the United States. His main objective was to meet with President Trump and discuss Iran's ballistic missile program. If you watched any footage from the 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran, you know that Iran possesses a very robust ballistic missile capability. They may not have nuclear weapons yet, but their ballistic missiles alone are capable of causing real and serious damage. And the bad news for Israel is that it lies within range. Moreover, it appears that Israel's air defense systems, the Iron Dome, and all other layers of aerial defense it possesses, are not capable of intercepting every ballistic missile. This means Israel wants to eliminate the program before Iran can expand it any further. And according to reports, Iran is spending vast amounts of money rebuilding its ballistic missile program. All of this is happening while the country is enduring a devastating economic crisis. The regime is in a state of total panic. Khamenei appeared on state television shouting, "We will not retreat before the enemy. We will bring them to their knees." He rallied a crowd behind him to chant slogans against America and Israel. What we are witnessing right now is not a temporary crisis of a regime, nor an uprising that can simply be crushed. It is the absolute and final moment of the collapse of an entire era. The smoke rising into the sky over Tehran that night is the incense of the political funeral of Khamenei's regime. The Iranian people are correcting a historic mistake made 47 years ago with blood, tears, and unbreakable courage. The long, dark, and freezing winter that began in 1979 is coming to an end during these burning nights of 2025. The return of the Shah is not merely the restoration of a dynasty. It is Iran's return to the civilized world. And you, what do you think about all of this? Do you believe the Iranian people will finally rid themselves of this regime? Leave your opinion in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content from Frontline, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss future updates.